You've been sitting at your desk for hours, possibly days, and you just can't get any words out. Writer's block isn't any fun. It isn't pretty, and it isn't an excuse to twiddle your thumbs. In this episode of The Author Switch, I'm going to share what writer's block is, really, and a framework that can help you bust through it forever.
The Author Switch.
Hello, and welcome to The Author Switch, the podcast that's dedicated to helping new and aspiring authors turn on the author switch to success in their minds. I am your host, Carma Spence, the author of the award-winning and best-selling book, Public Speaking Superpowers, and the best-selling book, Home Sweet Homepage. Writer's block is a frustrating phenomenon that can hit any writer at any time. Even famous writers such as Leo Tolstoy, Stephen King, and J.K. Rowling have experienced it. I myself have experienced it. Writer's block makes you feel like nothing's in your head. No ideas for stories or articles, and it can seem impossible to write anything that matters. It can make you feel like you're suddenly stupid. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the following things: what writer's block is, the 6 types of things that can cause writer's block, and my monster method for busting through writer's block for good. If you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, I recommend that you go to authorswitch.com and find the video version of this podcast, because I will be sharing visuals that will help some of what I'm going to share make more sense. The video version can be found on YouTube and is posted on my blog. Now that the logistical stuff is done, let's get down to business. If you were to search the internet looking for a remedy for your writer's block, I'm afraid you won't find much of it that is of any use. I've done some extensive research, and here's what I've found. Most of the articles are lists of tips, right? And each tip has like 1 to 3 sentences, and they're very light on actual meaty stuff. They are mostly fluff. They aren't really researched. They aren't backed by science. They are usually opinion. Sometimes they're just a list of quotes of authors saying, "Oh, this is what I did." After noticing this, I decided to do something that was sort of semi-scientific, and do a study of what was available. And so I pulled the top 14 articles that promised to give you solid advice of what to do if you had writer's block. And I analyzed them. And here's what I found. Of those 14, only 11 of them provided actual advice. Of those 11, 52% of the advice addressed creative issues, and 26% addressed mindset issues. The remaining 22% of the advice was a mix of physical, emotional, and multiple cause solutions. What I found most surprising and frankly most disappointing was that the most common piece of advice was some version of suck it up and stop worrying that you're not good enough. But not one of the articles gave any indication of how you were supposed to suck it up and not worry that you weren't good enough. Not helpful. In addition to a very poor selection of usable advice for overcoming writer's block, I found a lot of articles that basically said that writer's block didn't exist. Here is a selection of them. Now, how could this be, you might ask, when there are such famous cases of writer's block? Well, those who don't believe in writer's block say it's a myth. I haven't experienced it, therefore it doesn't exist. Writers who claim to have had it have something else and are misnaming it. It's simply an excuse. Writers who claim to have it are really lazy or unprofessional and are hiding behind this romantic label. Not very nice. A lot of shaming. And often the people who are saying it doesn't exist, they're saying it because they didn't experience it. And I hate to say this, but although I never shamed other people's I used to be one of those people who said, well, I didn't experience it. And then I realized, wait a minute, I had experienced it. I didn't label it writer's block. Because I kept writing, I just wasn't writing that. But anyway, so as I dug into this, I began to realize what was really going on in this dialogue around writer's block. Because of the many things that have gone on in literary history and in Hollywood and how they portray writer's block, writer's block has begun to be thought of as a thing in and of itself, a malady, as if it were a disease like the common cold. But it's not. Writer's block is a symptom, not a disease. You would no more say a sneeze does not exist, you have allergies, than you should say writer's block does not exist, you have a fear of failure. And like a sneeze, which can be caused by multiple things, such as allergies, a common cold, a feather brushing up against your nose, writer's block has multiple causes, and those causes are unrelated. And there are a myriad of them. But to make it easier to understand, I've organized all those many causes into categories or groupings and given them monster names. Thus, the monster method for beating writer's block. But before I go into the 6 causes of writer's block, here is a quick commercial break. Attention authors, speakers, and coaches. Does your website attract nothing but crickets and tire kickers? Then you might be committing one of the 5 deadly mistakes of homepage design. Home Sweet Homepage, How to Fix the 5 Deadly Mistakes that authors, speakers, and coaches make with their website's homepage will help you clear the crickets, repel the tire kickers, and start attracting the right kind of traffic that will convert to readers, clients, and speaking opportunities. Available wherever books are sold in paperback and ebook formats. bookmarketingclub.com/homepage book. Hello, and welcome back to the Author Switch, the podcast dedicated to helping new and aspiring authors turn on the author switch to success in their mind. I am your host, Carma Spence, author of the best-selling books, Public Speaking Superpowers, and Home Sweet Homepage. Before the break, I talked about how writer's block is a symptom and not a disease. And I mentioned that there were 6 categories of causes for writer's block. These 6 causes, roughly in order of how common they are these: creative krakens, mind goblins, emotional hobgoblins, environmental ogres, body banshees, and spiritual specters. Now, a creative kraken is when something in the creative process glitches. So that can be when your vision for what you're writing is somehow beyond your ability to make it happen, or perhaps you turned left when your vision meant for you to turn right, and your subconscious goes, "Whoa, Nelly," and blocks you. So these are common creative glitches. Mind goblins are mindset issues. So this can be imposter syndrome, a fear of failure, a fear of success. Emotional hobgoblins are emotional issues. So these can be grief, anger, a fear of something real in your environment, like I'm going to lose my house, or you know, it's different than fear of failure, which is not something real. So that differentiates it from a mind goblin. Although emotional hobgoblins often hang out with mind goblins, so they often work hand in hand. And then the next one is an environmental ogre. That's something in your environment. There is a lot of research that shows that your environment affects your mental health. So, of course, it can cause writer's block. So, common environmental ogres that cause writer's block are things like clutter, because writers are often messy. You get in the zone and you just don't put things away. Noise is a big cause writer's block. Smells can cause writer's block. And then there's body banshees. These are things like aches and pains and health and lack of sleep and changing medication, changing things in your diet, things like that. And finally, spiritual specters, which are the rarest kind of writer's block. And that's when your disconnection to the divine causes you to get writer's block. These are probably more common in writers who write about faith, although anyone who has a strong connection to their faith could probably get a spiritual specter. Now, why is it important for you to understand all 6 causes? I mean, wouldn't you think you only need to know the one that's blocking you? Well, here's the thing. Every time you get writer's block, it may not be the same cause. You can get a different cause every time. And on top of that, you can get a primary cause that is aggravated by secondary and tertiary causes. And often the primary cause is the hardest one to get rid of. But if you can get rid of a tertiary or secondary cause, you can at least get back to writing something while you work on the primary cause. So it's always a good idea to understand all 6 causes so that you can work on these, because they kind of often gang up on you. Now, the premise of the monster method for busting through writer's block is that if you understand these 6 causes, and then you can identify one and therefore find the right cure. And because you want to understand what's causing the writer's block before you implement the cure. Because if you are trying to cure your writer's block by using a gratitude journal, which is either a spiritual specter or mindset cure, and it turns out that you're really blocked by a body banshee or an environmental ogre, it just isn't going to work. It just isn't going to work. You need to find the cure for your writer's block that actually applies to the cause of your writer's block. So how do you identify the cause of your writer's block? Well, I'm glad you asked. I've developed a free tool called the Writer's Block Assessment that will diagnose your writer's block for you. When you're blocked, you take the assessment and you receive your diagnosis. Then you go about to find the right cure to get you back to work. I even provide some suggestions. You can find it at authoneering.com/block assessment. Can you see how powerful this method is? Before, you would just try out tips and hope it worked. It was like throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing if it stuck. And when a tip did work, you never knew why. And then if you tried it again and it didn't work, you never knew why. But now, armed with the Monster Method framework and the Writer's Block assessment tool, you can understand what's really going on. You can zero in on the tips and methodologies that have the best chances of getting you back to work, which means that you can spend less time blocked and more time doing what you love to do, writing. And isn't that the point? Right? Now, of course, there may be times that you may need help diagnosing your writer's block. You may have multiple causes, or it's not entirely clear what the cause is. And if that's the case, I am here for you. You can easily book some time with me to discuss your needs by going to authoneering.com/schedule and have a free, curious conversation with Carma. You like the alliteration? I do. I adore alliteration. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this episode of The Author Switch. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and a positive review on whatever platform you experienced it on. And I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel as well. And stay tuned to the next episode, which is coming up in August, in which I will be talking with author Dave Reed. He is the author of dark, epic fantasy fiction, and he will be talking about how to tell and structure a story. If you are a fiction writer, this is a must-catch episode. In other news, starting in September, the Author Switch is going to be going weekly. And every month I will have 3 interviews with authors. How exciting! But for now, I'm your host, Carma Spence, signing off. Ciao for now.
The Author Switch at authorswitch.com.
Yes, eventually. I just thought I'd record my podcast. That'll make an interesting blooper. You've been sitting at your desk for hours, possibly days, and you... Okay, here comes the cat. All right. Writer's block just isn't any fun. And it is an excuse. It isn't a... Okay. Writer's block is a frustrating for long... I can talk. I really can. Even famous writers, such as Leo Toit... I recommend you go to authorswitch.com and find If you are listening to the audio version of this podcast, I recommend that you go to And not much of the information of this advice is based on Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I know this stuff. I really do. In other news, starting in September, the Author Switch, in other news, the